Okay, now we've covered the marketing plan in Chapter 7. We're going to talk about two other chapters that are pretty closely related to Chapter 7. That's Chapter 17, the promotional plan, and Chapter 18, global opportunities or international business opportunities. So let's spend a little time now talking about promotional planning in Chapter 17. In communications, we have but basically various media that we can use to communicate, and we're trying to communicate certain messages that would inform and persuade our customers. In fact, everything that you see in most of the media today, the majority of what you see, is designed to inform you and persuade you to buy a product or service. So today we'll talk a little bit about personal selling, and we'll talk about advertising, and we'll talk about some sales promotional tools that you can use in communicating to customers. There's three major components to the communication process, and we'll show you a diagram here in just a moment that really points this out. You have the source, this is the message sender. You have the channel, this is the path that the message travels, and you have the receiver, who is the recipient of the message. So you have a source, a channel, and a receiver on any message that you're trying to put out. Most of the time, we as consumers are on the receiver side. So if you think about the last TV show you watched or whatever, you notice that there was a lot of minutes devoted during that show to advertising. And that advertising is coming from some source, which happens more than likely it's the company providing the product or the service, through a channel, in which in this case would be a media channel that ultimately ends up on the TV that you're looking at, to the receiver, which is you. And so that's what we're seeing during a lot of our waking minutes. And now that's the communication components. There's kind of forms of promotional communication as well. There's non-personal, which is just advertising. There's personal, which is personal selling. And then there's special forms, which are sales promotion. And we see those every day of our life, those three types of promotional communication. Now let's look a little bit further at the diagram here. The cylinder on the left is a personal communication channel, and this is like you were talking to your family and the message you want to send. In this case, it was "I love you and please send money." This is one that you guys probably do a lot. And then your channel options are to send an email message, or to visit home personally, or to send a greeting card, or to make a phone call, or whatever. Those will be your channels for transmitting that message. And then the receiver, of course, in the personal case of the students, would be your parents. Now, on a small business communication channel, your company will be the source, or your agent, but typically your agent is representing you. So your company is the source. The message that you want to get out is, here's my product and I want you to buy it, so buy my product. And so your channel options are many. You can do a newspaper advertisement, you can do a personal sales call, you can do a blog posting, you can advertise it on an internet website, and on and on and on, or any combination of those. And obviously the receiver, or your customers, are those folks who you believe will be your customers in the future. So you see the parallel now here between a personal communication channel and a business communication channel. I have a source, I have a message I want to get out, I have lots of different ways of getting that message out, and I want the message to go to my customers. They're the receivers of the message. Now, in this chart here, we define promotional mix. Whenever we're doing promotional communications, it doesn't have to be one specific type of promotional communication. It could be a mix of communications. I could use a combination of newspaper and a blog, or email and a television advertising, or some form like that. A real popular advertising media right now is the movies. I mean, if you go to a movie and you sit down and at the beginning of that movie there will be some advertisements pop up, and those are paid for. And you're a dedicated audience. You're a captive audience, so you have to look at that advertising. It's a very effective and very cost-effective way of advertising nowadays. And so you see that in the movie. That's a promotional mix, but typically that advertisement there is tied to some other form of communication, a newspaper ad, a other TV ads, or something like that. So you have a mix. So down at the bottom here we say, well, the makeup of the mix is determined by three primary factors: the geographic nature of the market. Where is it geographically are you trying to reach? And typically, with a certain type of ad or a certain type of promotion scheme, you'll be geographically limited what you can do with it because it's tailored toward that particular culture. And it also depends upon the size of your promotional budget, and it will also depend upon what is it that you're trying to sell. What is the characteristics of the product? Is it a pure consumer product, or is it a factory product? Exactly what kind of product is it? Industrial product or whatever. So then we've kind of identified now this is the kind of the communication process. We have a sender, a source, we have a channel, and we have a receiver, and we can have various types of channels that we can use as we're trying to get that message to the receiver. So the question then becomes, how much do I have to spend? Well, in the type of advertising that we've referred to some here already, it can get very, very expensive. And so you have to plan ahead of time if you're operating a company, particularly if you're operating a small business. You have to plan well ahead of time about how you want to budget and spend your money for advertising or for promotion. So, and by the way, promotion and advertising are two different things, but for promotion is what we're really talking about here. So there's about four different ways to do it. You can allocate a percentage of sales, which means I'm going to have X dollars of sales this year. 10% of that money I'm going to set aside for promotion. I can decide right off the bat just a flat number, how much can I spare. I can say, okay, the competition is spending X dollars, so I'm going to spend X dollars. Or I'm going to stand back and say, I've analyzed this, I know what the market is. I believe it's going to take this many dollars to do the job that I'm trying to do. So those are the four questions or the four techniques for deciding on what your advertising budget should be. So let me just say right up front that the most common way of doing it, and although it's not true every case, but for companies that aren't real aggressive in the marketplace, aren't necessarily consumer oriented, and the allocation of a percentage of sales is the most common way for establishing what the advertising budget or the promotion budget is going to be. Now here's a diagram that shows you kind of how these processes work. You can consider all four of them if you want to, then do a comparison process, and through that comparison process, and typically it's going to be driven by cost, money, how much it costs. You make your decision, and you then establish your promotional budget. Now, let's talk a little bit about customer goodwill and relationship selling. And I'm really high on this whole concept of relationship selling. What that means basically is that I'm going to establish long-term relationships with my customers. And so I will build that relationship so that over the course of months and years, I will establish a relationship with my customers. It's almost like a friendship where I know what they're thinking, they know what I'm thinking, and we can be honest and straightforward with each other. And that's really what I set out to do. When I was in industry, I always set out to build strong relationships with my customers so that we could communicate well with each other. Well, what's involved in doing that? When the customer doesn't know you from anybody else, here's some tips for you. You want to maintain a good appearance. You want to have a pleasant personality. You want to use good professional etiquette in making your contacts. And you want to understand the customer's point of view. And you want to be very ethical in your operating standards, how you operate. Now, probably the most important bullet there that's the hardest for us to do is number 4. Understanding the customer's point of view. I have to learn to look at everything from the customer's point of view and then try to satisfy what my customer's needs are. And I can determine what those needs are if I have a strong relationship with that customer because through that relationship, the customer will feel comfortable telling me what his real needs are, and then I can set about trying to meet those needs. Another issue for young guys like yourselves who are just getting ready to go into the marketplace, the first 3 are really important. You want to have a good professional personal appearance. You want to have a very pleasant personality. You have to work on that. And you want to use sound professional etiquette. And probably, if we have a deficiency in what we do here, is that we do not spend time teaching our students in the College of Business what professional etiquette is. How do you behave at a dinner meeting? How do you behave if you're meeting somebody at their headquarters? How do you conduct yourself over lunch or dinner? Well, what about breakfast meetings? What about all these things? How do we conduct ourselves? How do you conduct yourselves at a reception for a famous person? And how do you work a crowd as a professional in an environment like that? And so we need to learn what professional etiquette is all about. How do you dress for them? How do you shake somebody's hand? How do you hand somebody a business card? How do you treat a lady in the audience? All those things become important in professional etiquette. So that's something that we're probably a little deficient on. We need to do a better job on. Now, one of the things you got to do is you got to try to reduce cost in the personal selling. So what you want to do, and I've seen guys do this a lot over the years, particularly people who are covering wide geographic areas in their selling, they will organize their travel so that it's most efficient, so their cost is minimized in the travel and in how they contact their customers. And you want to kind of really efficiently schedule your sales calls. And then once you make your call to your customers, push the products, that best contribute to sellers' cost economies, and emphasize high margin products when you can. But again, I want to go back to the relationship and say most customers know when you're emphasizing high margin products. But if you have a relationship, you can point your customer to the best product, what I'm going to call the high value product. What is the product that has the best value with your customer? And so that's really the approach you have to take, and be honest with both yourself and your customer. Now let's talk a little bit about advertising for small companies. There's the definition of advertisement here on the screen. You can see it right there. You guys need to read that and understand it. What are the objectives of advertising? There's really three. I'm trying to sell something, and I want my advertising to sell it. So I'm trying to inform, I'm trying to persuade, I'm trying to remind. And a good advertising program will do all three of these. I want it to serve as a complement to my actual product and or service that I'm offering. And I want to properly reflect changes in customers' needs and preferences. Have you ever looked at an advertisement that's being presented to you in terms of how is that advertiser, the supplier or the vendor, trying to convince me that I have a need for his product or service? And if you'll take that approach as you look and observe advertising, you'll discover some very interesting things. Here's one thing to discover. One of the things that makes us feel like that we have a need is when we have a fear. So fear drives needs. So how many advertising schemes do you see where we try to first create a fear? The next big bubble is getting ready to happen. This is a financial ad that you see a lot of. The next big bubble is getting ready to happen. Don't be caught on the wrong side. See this video. And so they spend 5-10 minutes trying to build into you a real fear factor about the impending collapse of the country or the collapse of the world, and that you really need to buy gold. So you see a lot of fear-based advertising. The politicians are masters at creating fear scenarios. We're going to create a fear scenario to get you to support what we're trying to do. And politicians do this all the time. It's a classic advertising approach. So what kind of advertising is there? Well, there's product advertising where I'm advertising a specific product or service, and there's institutional advertising where I'm trying to portray or paint a picture of my firm or my organization. Let's talk a little bit about advertising agencies. Most people think immediately when they think of advertising, I'm going to get some kind of little ad out, I'm going to run a newspaper ad, I'm going to do something, put a sign on a fence post or whatever. But most of the time, if you're doing big-time serious advertising, you're going to hire an agency to work with you. And there's all kinds of agencies. There's very high-end, very expensive agencies, and there's little smaller groups that will help you with your advertising. And most of them are typically locally based and maybe just one or two people in the office. But you need to have somebody to help you with the advertising that's a professional. And so what they will do is provide you with your design, your artwork, your copy for the ads. They know exactly whatever source you're using, whatever channel you're using. They know exactly what type of source material they need. And they will also recommend with you the media that you should use, where is the best place to put this type of a program, what kind of advertising do you really want to do for the maximum effectiveness. They will advise you on your promotion and your merchandise displays, how they should look. There's a lot of people that are professionals at how you display products in a consumer or in a retail environment. In fact, there's whole firms that do nothing but study how's the best way to present a product in a retail environment. All of the shelves and all of the props and all of the little tables and the signs and things that you see in a retail business or in a department store type business, those are very carefully thought out and designed by people that do that professionally. They will also the ad agency will conduct market sampling studies, and they'll furnish mailing lists for you, and they'll do a lot of things for you. But the bottom line that I will leave with you is that for a small company, a small entrepreneurial company, you may not be able to afford an advertising agency. So you may have to come up with kind of a cheap bootstrapping type technique that will allow you to accomplish some of your advertising goals. Now, there's nothing wrong with consulting with professionals and consulting with advertising agencies from the standpoint of advice and what they might do for you and things like that. But there's a lot of people running around who are kind of single type operators who are gifted and experienced in advertising and graphics and media, and they can help you with that at a much, much lower cost. So be careful about handing over your advertising program to a full-scale ad firm. And there's other sources too. Down here at the bottom you see suppliers and trade associations. A lot of trade associations serve as good advertising channels for companies who are involved in those associations. Now, here's some decision factors you have to come to grips with on advertising. You've got to decide what is the frequency of advertising that I'm going to have. And you have to think about the fact that I have to do it on a regular basis for long-term effectiveness and continuity that I'm going to try to establish in the marketplace. Another scheme you have to think about is, do I need to blast the marketplace so I cover the entire marketplace very quickly in a very short period of time with whatever messages I'm trying to get across? And or do I need to have a combination? I'm coming out with a new product, I'm going to blast it out, and then I'll keep a steady stream of advertising and promotion going on that product so that the product gets into the mind of the consumers. A great example to think about here, most of us are familiar with it, is Apple Corporation. When Apple comes out with a new iPhone about once a year, and just think about what do they do when they come out with the iPhone. Well, they have a huge press conference. The CEO comes out on the stage. They put on a big show. They have the design chief comes out and walks people through the operations of it. They show up at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. They have advertisements in every major business media in the country. They do reviews on Wall Street Journal, technical reviews on Wall Street Journal. They literally saturate the media channels with the messages about their products. They're really good at that, perhaps some of the best around. And so if you just watch that, you'll get a good dose of what a real full-scale ad program looks like. Please pardon my coughing and my sneezing. I tried to put this recording on hold before I sneezed just then, but I didn't quite make it, so pardon it. I hope I didn't damage equipment or hurt your ears. Now, let's talk about some of the major advertising media, both advantages and disadvantages. And these are media that you're pretty familiar with. Newspapers are a pretty common place of advertising, but let me just say this. I mean, you see the advantages and disadvantages there of newspapers. The newspaper as an advertising media is starting to fade a little bit, and I'm not really sure, where newspapers are most effective right now. Their readership has fallen off dramatically. The advent of blogs and the internet and all kinds of discussion channels on the internet is really supplanting the newspapers. Most newspapers now have more blogs than they do feature articles in their newspaper. So you just have to decide if the newspaper is a place where you really need to be. Typically, it'll be geographically limited, and it's limited in who actually is looking at it. You see the disadvantages there, not much demographic selectivity. The color capabilities are pretty limited. They get more expensive and so forth. Magazines can be good. If I look at particularly industry type journals, they can be very good. So you can see the advantages of magazines. Good reproduction, especially, can do really great color sometimes. They have good demographic selectivity because magazines typically know exactly what the demographics are of their readers, have a good pass-along capability. Most well-known magazines typically have good websites that will also give you good distribution to their website as well. The disadvantage is they can be very expensive. They typically will want a long-term commitment from an advertiser. Typically takes a long lead time to get into a magazine and so forth. Radio is a very common one. We all see that every day. It's low cost. It has a good, quick message you can get out. Typically, it's limited on who's going to hear it. For the most part, there's some radios that also broadcast on the internet in parallel, and so they get a really broad coverage. And so they have some real advantages in that respect. The disadvantages are that there's no visual treatment. The design of the ad, who speaks the ad, is important. You typically have a short advertising life on the message. It's not something you can just keep on going forever, although some companies do, repeat it for a long time. And there can be commercial clutter. I know that when I'm listening on the radio to a favorite show of some sort, I get tired of certain types of ads, and so I'll just flip around. When an ad comes on a particular channel, I'll just flip to another channel until that ad is gone, then I'll flip back. Here's some more channels. Television, which we're all familiar with. You can see the advantages and disadvantages there. It can be very expensive on television. Outdoor media is, I think, less favorable now than it used to be. Its cost is not too bad, but it's very selective from a geographic standpoint. Typically, short message, you're limited in what you can say, and a lot of people don't like signs popping up anyway. They don't like roadside signs. We see them all the time, billboards we call them. Probably the fastest growing medium is internet. And there's all kinds of ways to advertise on the internet. You're seeing it every day with your smartphones and the apps that you have on your smartphones. Some apps have done a really good job of embedding ads into their apps so that they either flow through or they pop up on your screen and pop off. And they've done a really good job on that. And it's going to get better as time goes on. We're still trying to figure out how best to use the internet for marketing and advertisement. One of the real difficulties of the internet, whatever scheme you're trying to use on the internet, is the difficulty in measuring ad effectiveness. How do we measure it? Google and some of the other companies like that count clicks. How many times did this ad get clicked on? So they count clicks. That's a way of measuring effectiveness. Somehow or another, that the number of clicks has to at some point in time relate to sales, so you got to relate it to that. But we haven't figured all that out yet. But we'll as time goes on, we'll figure out schemes for best measuring the effectiveness of ads on the internet. Now, typically there's a couple of ways to advertise. You can advertise on your company website, and you have to be very careful there too in designing carefully. It's a pretty common way of doing it. Or you can create a company blog where you're creating an article, frequently, every day, sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes every few days, sometimes. Different companies do it different ways, but most companies now have at least one ongoing blog on their corporate website where they're conveying different types of messages to their customer. Back to the website in general, the internet in general, it's becoming a really a big advertising media or advertising channel for small companies, and there are companies now rising up. I talked to the owner of one of these a couple of weeks ago, who do nothing but search engine optimization for other companies. What that means is that I'm going to take your website, and I'm going to take the way you present yourself on the web, and I'm going to try to optimize that so that search engines, when they're looking for particular types of products or services, will automatically and quickly go to my company and rank it high in their ranking list. That's a big deal. A lot of companies are really working hard to try to get their companies ranked high when it comes to searches. So here's how that works. I go onto the internet. I hit Google, and I want to do a Google search on men's shoes. Well, there's a whole bunch of men's shoe suppliers who have optimized their search engines or optimize their website so that when a search engine is looking for men's shoes, their company will pop up at the top of the list. And in some cases, they are paying companies like Google and Yahoo and other companies like that to present their ads first. And now what most time what the big search companies will do is they'll highlight those paid promotions in a certain highlight, so you see those, and then you'll see the ranking below that of the search engine results. And so it's a big deal to try to maneuver to get your company listed high on those search engine results. So here's some website essentials that you want to consider as you design your website. And by the way, every one of you who are thinking about a small company, you need to have a website or an internet component to your company. And that can be various things, but you need to have some internet component to your company that makes it easy for your customers to find you, makes it easy for your customers to know what you're promoting, what you're selling, what the prices are, where you are, how they get to them, can they order on site, all those things most people will want to find on the internet before they actually drive to your store. I know, I look at my own family, that's what we do now. It's totally different than the way we used to do it. But now if we're going to buy a product, we'll search it on the internet first to kind of get our bearing and find out who has it and where they're located, and then we'll go find the product and actually buy it. So you want to have number two, a simple, sensible web address. You want to have an easily navigated site map. Those two are really important. How do you find contact information? Another important thing, I can't tell you how many websites I've looked at, and I look and look and look to try to find contact information. Then I want to look at customer testimonials. These are the reviews that you see products ranked by. You want to see the website invite the customer to do something when they get on that website. And know the basics of search engine optimization, SEO they call it. Have good, fresh, quality content all the time. That means that if I'm going to have a website, I'm going to have to manage that website, and I'm going to have to be constantly changing what's on my homepage so that my customers won't get bored to death. You want to have a good, secure hosting platform and have a design and a style that's friendly to your online readers. Those are all good tips. These are really good tips for today's world with websites and internet activity. Now, I talked a little bit about mobile devices. There's some real clever schemes going on now with mobile apps and advertising, so you can think about how you might want to do that. Social media is the big question mark, and social networking. I'm going to combine those two together. The jury is still out on how best to use social media for advertising and promotion. Haven't really figured that all out yet. There are some inroads being made right now where we're getting ads put onto social media platforms. But the whole relationship of what we do on social media and its results from the sales and profit standpoint are totally yet to be determined. We really don't know yet how that's impacting our business to do business. So our ability to do business. So anyway, social media and social networking are two big areas right now that are going to impact promotion and marketing, but we're not really sure how just yet, and we're not really sure what the best approaches are yet for social media and social networking. So here's some other questions you can ask yourself. Is your website mobile friendly? Can it be found where mobile device users look? And have you started social networking communities? Do you chat with your customers and prospects? Are customers reviewing your business? Are you giving your audience what they want? And so what you're seeing here is this whole emerging networking scheme where we're actually communicating one-to-one. A company is communicating with its customers. The customer is communicating with the company. You are communicating with 10 others. One of the others is communicating with 150 others. And so that network is just blowing up right before our very eyes. It's changing the way that we communicate and the way we promote our products and services. So there are a number of kind of basic web promotions. You do banner ads. We're pretty familiar with those. Pop-up ads, we all hate those. A direct email promotion, we're pretty familiar with that. And spam. And let me just tell you this right off the bat. Number 1 and 2 and 4 are totally probably not as effective as you think. In fact, spam is terribly not effective. People hate it. In fact, I've set up my email sites so that I have one site that's devoted strictly to spam, and then other sites are devoted just to important communication. The best promotion scheme on the internet right now is direct email. I mean, people find that hard to believe, but it is still the best promotion scheme, direct email. So what that means is a company, I have to build a database with a bunch of names on it so that I can get my emails to the right people to know what my promotions are, to know what my products are, what my sales are, getting them into the display floor and things like that. The best way to do that right now is email promotion. through a database that I have of either my customers plus my potential customers, my customers plus potential customers, some others. And so I have a database, and I can get direct emails out to every person on that database just about as often as I like. That's another issue, too, is how frequently. Most people don't like an email every day from the same firm. I got a couple of people who send me emails every day. I hate it. I don't like it. I like the companies, like their product, but they're about to spoil me off of their products because of their everyday emails. They come to my spam site, by the way. So you can do web sponsorships where you pay another organization to be part of their web page, and typically what will happen there is I post a small ad on their web page. I pay them for that, and when somebody clicks on that, that leads them directly to my website. So I'm paying for a link is what I'm doing. And a link is just what we were just talking about there. One firm pays another to include a click on or click through advertising link on its website. That's pretty common right now in web promotion and advertising. You see that a lot, different ways of trying to get people to link over to your main website so that you can capture them and get their attention. I heard a discussion a couple of weeks ago on how you can use Pinterest to direct people to your website. And so all of your social media, all of your other advertising schemes, you want to direct people to your website where you can kind of say, hey, I've got them captured. Now I'm going to direct them to my products or to my physical location or wherever. In other words, they're here for a reason. Now, let's look at some sales promotion tools in addition to the ones we already talked about. And one is probably the most important for small companies or trade show exhibits. These are really important. This is the cheapest, most efficient way for most small companies to promote their products and services. So let's look at what makes trade show exhibits effective. And I'm just going to tick down through these lists very quickly because I've got a couple of ideas I want to throw at you. You want to be familiar with the trade show's history. Is it effective? Is it good? Do most of the key people that you're interested in show up there? I need to prepare a professional-looking display or booth. Sometimes we call them that. I got to have plenty of materials on hand. I've got to make sure that I, first of all, have a good product that I'm promoting in that trade show. I can do pre-show promotion and advertising to get people to come by my booth. I can have little giveaways or gimmicks to get even more people to come by my booth. I've got to have trained people in my display area, in my booths, and I've got to be prepared to follow up. In all of the trade show work that I did in the business world, I discovered very quickly that trade shows are very, very hard work, and they're very, very costly. But on a contact basis, they're very, very cost efficient, because in one location I can get most of my key customers in that location. That's what I want to look for, that one location, that one show where I can locate and find the majority of my key customers and spend time with them in a dedicated way at basically a neutral site that's of a lot of interest, not only to them but to me and other people in the business. So trade shows are really, they can be very effective, but they are hard work. They require a lot of planning. They can be extremely costly. I know that when I was involved in trade shows quite a bit, we did two major air shows a year. Major air show a year, two major air shows every other year. And the Paris Air Show was one of our major air shows. It's probably the most famous and largest air show in the world. This is where people gather together to to display their airplane products and to sell all kinds of stuff that goes on airplanes and services that go with airplanes and defense equipment and all those things that are related to airplanes. And so at these air shows, all these folks from around the world show up. Well, to do a major air show, our company would book an air show booth, a reservation, a year ahead of time and begin planning the day the day the previous show is over. We begin planning for the next year so that we have our budgets, our designs, everything ready to go by the time that trade show hits us. At a trade show, I would make sure that I knew which of my major customers were going to be present there. I made sure to know which of my competitors would be there and where they would be located with their booths and what they would be showing. I made sure that I was going to be able to contact the right trade media at the trade shows. I would schedule the entire week full of appointments, either on press conferences or visiting with key customers or visiting with key media types. I often would spend time just visiting, having dinner with a key trade media type so that you can kind of get an idea of what they're thinking about. They get an idea of what you're thinking about, and lo and behold, in the next issue of the XYZ Journal, your comments show up as an opinion piece or as a, and oh, by the way, that they picked up at the Paris Air Show. So those things pay off for you. It takes a lot of work and a lot of planning to make a trade show work for you, even on a small basis. You can't just haphazardly do it. I could talk about this for another hour, but if any of you guys have small companies and you're worried about trade shows, see me and I'll give you some tips on how to handle them. Publicity is something that you can do as a small company. You can do it very, very cheap. What I like to do with a small company is provide a press release or news release to the local media, and surely, most of the time, one of the TV station or the radio station or the newspaper will want to interview you one-on-one. That's all free. That's all free publicity when you do that. Another thing you can do is write an op-ed piece to the local newspaper. The local newspaper is looking for news. They don't have time to write everything they have to fill up their pages. And so oftentimes they would just plug an article into 2 or 3 columns on a page because they had that blank space and they had this article that's coming in from Senator XYZ, and so they just put Senator XYZ's comments on there and fill the space. Well, you give them good articles, good 600-word write-ups and op-ed pieces, and they'll get published, and that's all free publicity for your company. So build those local relationships that will allow you to basically get free publicity just for nothing, because your local newspaper and your local media typically are desperate for good news, and they're desperate for stuff that's already packaged for them.